Behind the Knife, the surgery podcast. Relevant and engaging content designed to help you dominate the day.
Hi everyone, my name is Kara Button. I'm a general surgery resident at Maine Medical Center and a Behind the Knife Surgical Education Fellow. Today we're focusing on flexibility in surgical training, specifically a program known as the 5 and 6. This option allows residents, with approval from their program and the ABS, to complete 5 years of residency training over 6 calendar years. Unlike traditional research time, the extra year is spread out over 5 years, creating more flexibility for residents who may need time for family, personal, or professional reasons. I'm honored to be joined today by two incredible guests. Dr. Joe Buyske is the president and CEO of the American Board of Surgery and has held a leadership role with the ABS since 2009. During her time there, the 5 and 6 became a formal policy. And I'm also joined by Dr. Bridget Olson, who is one of my co-residents, a PGY4 at Maine Medical Center, and a current participant in the 5 and 6. Dr. Buyske and Dr. Olson, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Thank you. We're excited to be here.
We are especially excited to have Dr. Buyske back with us. She joined Behind the Knife in 2021 to discuss the family leave during surgical training after some recent changes in the ABS parental leave policy. And today we're re-engaging in that dialogue as we further explore the 5 and 6 pathway. Dr. Buyske, to get us started, can you give us a quick overview of the baseline training requirements for general surgery, really in terms of how much time can a resident be away from clinical training without having to extend their time in residency?
Sure. So the short version or the core version is that there are 52 weeks in a year, and for a year to count, you have to work for 48 of those weeks. So 4 weeks away from clinical work. That should include any time that you spend at a conference, any time you spend doing research, any time you spend doing interviews. It's often interpreted as being vacation, but it's actually time away from clinical service. And that came about because of the kind of outcry in the 2005 to 2010 era, when program directors and fellowship directors were saying that surgical residents weren't adequately prepared. So I don't think that we agreed with that. But we did want to be able to compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges. So we really clarified the guidelines around what is a week off, how much time is it, what counts and what doesn't, because we found a pretty wide discrepancy between people allowing residents to take weeks off for interviews and weeks off for research. We're like, we want to understand exactly what this is and have people talk to us if there's any exceptions. So that's the baseline. And then the sort of accommodating life events, there are several leaves. There's an additional 4 weeks that can be used twice during your residency, once in the first 3 years and once again in the last 2 years. We kind of lump them differently because of the difference in leadership and learning that occurs in the different parts of residency. And that can be used for sort of a major family event, for caretaking, for a loved one. We've had people use it for a sick parent, sick spouse, sick child, for parental leave, for personal illness. So at that point, you're up to 8 weeks if you were going to take it all as a block. We also allow extension of training through August. So that's an additional 8.5 or 9 weeks to accommodate people who need more than that and still want to finish sort of on time. And then the last is we do allow averaging from year to year. So if you needed, extra time off in your second year, you could take a little less time of your 4 allotted weeks in your third year. So there's actually quite a few pathways, and it's up to the program director and the person involved to figure out what is going to work for them. And then, of course, my favorite, which is the 5 and 6. That's actually my favorite of all of them. I think it's the most flexible. And I think particularly since we're talking about supporting surgeon parents, it ain't all about the pregnancy and the new baby. So 5 and 6 is the one that allows you to then say, and then when the baby's a month old, I'm going to have more time with them, or I'm going to be able to stagger time off with my partner, because I think that that's a more realistic look than saying, oh, good, I got 8 weeks off for parental leave, which is, by the way, kind of short anyway.
Definitely kind of agree with that. Thank you so much for putting the timing and training into context. This can be a really confusing subject, especially for trainees who are trying to navigate parental leave or time off for any reason in residency. Now, launching into the 5 and 6 in particular, I'm curious about the history of the 5 and 6 and how did all of this get started, especially since this was before the changes to the formal parental leave policy?
I think there always, first of all, there were a growing number of women in residency. So the issue of parental leave was coming up a little bit more frequently. There was also a little bit of a social change where the non-birthing parent also might be interested in leave. And that was not a thing in surgical culture certainly prior to this century in any way. And then a growing drumbeat from program directors, from me, from other people in surgical leadership, that you have to kind of be prepared to acknowledge that life is going to happen during those, critical years of whatever, 27 to 32 or 26 to 35, that range of time, that you'd be foolish not to think that people are going to have children, people are going to get married, their siblings are going to get married, their parents are going to die. All kinds of things can happen that consume time. And for us to just let every one of those events be an unexpected catastrophe, how do we deal with this? Seemed very short-sighted. So I was in favor of, a rule that would allow people to take flexible time off. And I think that there was always probably some option to do that, but it wasn't written down and it wasn't formalized, which led to only sort of program directors of long standing who might have a contact at the board or who had successfully managed this time before. They might know enough to call and ask for special dispensation for a trainee who needed additional time off. That to me creates an in crowd and an out crowd. And I really, if I, that's one of my true norths, if you can have more than one, is to try as much as possible to make things transparent so that everybody has access to the same information. So I didn't feel comfortable with the idea that it was like, this isn't a problem, they just have to call, because I didn't think that everybody would know to call. So I wanted to have a rule in place, and that became the 5 and 6, published on the website, disseminated in the program director's newsletter, a fact. That happened in 2011, and that year we had one person take advantage of it.
Well, it's good to know that even the first year you had one person formally take advantage of something that I'm sure a few people had taken advantage of, but there were probably a lot of residents who didn't know that this was an option. So that's really great that the word got spread around. Now, speaking of word getting spread around, Dr. Olson, I'm curious as to how you learned about the 5 and 6 and how you decided on taking this training pathway.
Yeah, so in my spring of my intern year, I remember talking to my then program director, Dr. Whiting, and I was mentioning to him that I wish I had more time to reflect on my job, I think is initially how I put it, and how I wanted some time for research, but I wasn't sure I wanted to have to leave to go do it. And that at the time was pretty common at our residency that most people did not stay to do a research year or two. And he said, "Oh, I think you should do the 5 and 6. I think it would work great for you. We've had one resident do it previously, and she had used 2 6-month blocks." And that's how I ultimately decided on it. I told, my family and my brother, who's a psychiatry resident. I remember him saying, like, you'd be mad not to do this. This is the way to make residency an enjoyable, more normal experience. And I said, okay. And I did it, and it was great.
So, what had you heard from other residents before about the 5 and 6? Because I'm sure as a resident, this can be confusing in terms of how do you arrange your schedule and how do you keep track of what you're doing, your rotations? How did you approach that?
I talked to the resident who had done it before me, and she had some great advice, which I've told the resident who has done it after me, that you definitely need to be somewhat regimented with your schedule, because your schedule is going to span over two scheduling chiefs most likely. And so it does get confusing for people of, oh, is she a early 3, a late 3? What has she already done for rotations in the academic year prior when she was starting her third year, things like that. So she gave me advice on how to manage that, which is just having a spreadsheet and knowing exactly what I've done and tallying up all the weeks and months that I've spent on different rotations so that I can, at the beginning of each academic year, talk to the scheduling chiefs about, what I've already done, what I'm expecting for this following year. And that's worked really well so far.
I want to just jump in there because it sounds like you really took ownership of helping other people understand what you were doing, which I'm sure not everybody
Absolutely.
can do that or does do that. And I'm sure that made it more successful and less stressful for you and the people around you. You sort of showed up with the information that they might be wondering. Maybe they didn't even know to ask. They were just sort of uneasy, when you showed up on a new rotation. So I think, we should have an FAQ that says how to make this work and have a little summary about that. I like that approach a lot.
Yeah, I think so much of residency is having to show up at a certain time, but a lot of it is being in charge of your own education. And I think this really allows you to do that because you do have this kind of non-clinical time that you can use to further study, further do whatever, and you get to decide. And then with that comes the responsibility that this is, more work for the scheduling chiefs. It is more work for your program director. So I think on the flip side of being more on top of what your schedule is really helps balance out that workload.
Now, Dr. Buyske, Dr. Olson was just telling us about how she's divided up her time. And we know that there's the requirement for the number of rotations that you have to have for a chief year. But are there other regulations about how time has to be divided between years in the 5 and 6, or is it really up to the resident and their program director?
Other than the fact that when you are on, you have to stay on. You can't do a half day. You can't do then call that half time. It has to be, if I'm on a rotation, I match the rotation of the rest of the hospital, whether it's calendar month or 4 weeks or whatever. You're there, you're full time, and you're doing that. And then when you're off, you're off. So that's really the only rule. And as Bridget said, some people take blocks, 6 months on, 6 months off. Some people take the entire year. Some people, we've had more than one person do every other month. And then we've had people do any kind of mixture in between. And we've also had people not take the whole 12 months. They just graduated, really off cycle. They needed more than the extended training that goes into August. They needed 4 months or something instead. So some people take lesser time. But the rules it's really supposed to be pretty easy and also easy in that we don't ask you what you're doing with it. It's not, as is obvious from British stories, not only parental leave, it's for space, time, reflection, adventure, special interest, special life event. My dream was that someone would say, I want to use it to climb Everest. Hasn't happened yet, but I still have a little bit more time, could still happen. But I really wanted it to be for the things that might happen to you, both good and bad, and in between in those years of your life. So easy when it comes to the rules. We don't say, well, why? Tell us why. Tell us what you're going to accomplish. We just say, make sure when you're on.
Well, to any mountaineers who are out there listening, know that Dr. Buyske is supporting you if you have some mountaineering endeavors.
And I should say that my schedule for the listeners and people curious about it is that I did my intern year in normal, and then I'm doing my chief year full. And the 3 years in between those two, I'm stretching out over 4 years. So I have 3 months of non-clinical time during my second, third, and fourth year, which has been lovely.
You started off saying that we have to have 12 months of chief rotations. And, you can do chief rotations in your 4th year as long as or you can do non-chief rotations in your last year as long as there's an accommodating or balancing chief rotation in your 4th year. Now, what exactly is your 4th year if you're in 5 and 6 is a little confusing. And so to that, I would say the board is actually way friendlier than people think. So you could just call. The program administrators particularly know how to reach the staff that helps them. They have a very close relationship, and and the program directors they're free to reach out to me. They're sometimes surprised that they actually get me. But we like to work through that stuff together because we want to make it work. And we definitely don't want people to have some elaborate schedule that actually doesn't work. So when things are confusing, it's completely fine to reach out to the board office and we'll get you to the right person.
Wow, it was really great to hear. Not only is this a flexible program, but it's really one that is resident specific, where it's truly flexible in terms of timing and to make sure that it's the best fit for that particular resident. Now, I think one thing that can be kind of confusing is there's the American Board of Surgery, and then there's the hospital that the resident works for. Dr. Buyske, can you talk a little bit about how the American Board of Surgery might support this program, but then What does the ABS have to do with the actual hospital who's employing the resident?
Yeah, that is a that is a complicated problem. And it's really, as far as I know, medicine writ large is the only field that still has this very dense interface between education and work. And so the hospital is really on the work side. I mean, they do get funds for education, but really they're your employer. The HR rules of your work flow through the hospital, and you're also bound not just by the hospital, but by the state and perhaps the city that you work in, and the local environment and laws and regulations there. We're really on the education side. Our question is, did you learn what you needed to learn during your training to be a safe surgeon? And so the 5 and 6 pathway is, you can finish your training in this period of time and you'll still be admissible to our exams, because we believe that you will still be able to learn the stuff that you needed to learn. And actually I said still be able to, like maybe even better, but in any case, you'll be able to do it in that period of time. And it's really for the hospital to decide what they want to do about paying you and what your category is. Are you still a trainee? Are you related to them at all? It's selective. Not every program can do it. Not every program wants to do it. It's a little easier, I think, for the larger programs that are moving residents in and out of research years or extra education years, a little tougher on a program that only has a few people. And there are a lot of things like that. The international rotations. Some programs can do it, some programs can't. Some programs can manage flexibility in training, which is really changing rotations specific to residents. Some can't. And some can manage 5 and 6 and some can't. So we open the door to it. We try to make it easy for the program directors. We do share what we've learned from the people who've already taken it about how people managed it, but really it's to the hospital and the program directors to figure out if it's doable or not.
And Dr. Olson, I'm hoping that off that you can give us some real life examples of how did you make this work with the hospital? How did your employer adjust to your schedule?
Yeah. So, from my end, it was actually fairly easy. Dr. Whiting, the then program director, spoke with the dean of education and the DIO, and they approved that I become a .75 FTE resident. And they basically allowed me to have an extra year of benefits that were not discounted. I'm still allowed to do public service loan forgiveness. I still get all of my normal benefits, but instead of getting paid a full-time equivalent, I get paid, basically 3/4. And I still get paid every 2 weeks, even when I'm off, because it's discounted. Some people have elected to only get paid when they are working. I think that's much more difficult for accounting, and that's not what I chose to do. And then also, certainly that's a pay cut. Moonlighting impressively makes up for it quite quickly, which is a little painful, but it does. And to me, time was worth so much more than that small amount of salary that I was losing. So it all balanced nicely.
Now, has there ever been a situation in which you are in your non-clinical time, a time where you're not supposed to be at the hospital, and you've gotten called into work, and how would you have handled that?
No, I have not. I have had people ask if I can take a shift for them. Under the medical malpractice, it's was suggested to me, not formally told to me, but suggested that I not particularly not operate when I'm on my non-clinical time. So I'll occasionally take moonlighting shifts, but I do not take shifts for residents where they would need to be operating, which is at Maine Med pretty much all of the shifts. So I have said no. It is sometimes difficult for me because I do have a lot more time and I often feel like I want to help out, but that was something the person who did the 5 and 6 before me had encouraged me to be really specific and disciplined on my non-clinical months, that I was not to be in the hospital unless I was moonlighting.
It sounds really important, the need to set boundaries, not only for you personally and for what you're doing with your time, but from a medical malpractice protection standpoint and from a financial standpoint too. So I think a take home for our listeners who are considering this is know what the rules are within your hospital in terms of what your pay can be like, what your benefits will be like, what your malpractice insurance will be like, and what the culture within your program is going to be to make sure that you're not having an expectation for you to be there when you're not supposed to be there. So I think that those are probably some key considerations that you just brought up with that.
Yeah, and I think, Bridget, you took risk with this. You prolonged the period of low income after medical school. You delayed the time that you could take a fellowship or take a full-time job. You took on burden as well in electing to do this. You took responsibility for that. So if that bolsters anyone else's spines a little bit, it's not just like you're just hanging out at home and you're getting all the benefit and they're taking all the burden. You took burden as well.
Yeah, that's fair. And I do think that it's an important skill of setting boundaries. And I think while the schedule of the 5 and 6 might not be what my schedule is as an attending, the lessons that I've learned and how to create a life that I'm really happy with, I think will progress into my life as an attending. And I hope it prolongs my career because I've learned how to be in medicine, in surgery, and still protect my personal life and still do all the life events and be present for them in a way that I think will have long-term effects.
Makes me very, very happy. And it's very, very pleasing to hear.
And as your friend and co-resident, I certainly get to say that you bring a lot of that positivity and that perspective to our program, which is incredibly helpful. So having people like you involved in a team to be able to lift everyone up is truly wonderful.
IOU-BTK fans, it's Scott here with a word from our sponsors, and that's FIGS. And so it takes heart to build bodies that break records. Over the last 6 years, a team of incredible healthcare professionals did what most people thought was impossible. They rebuilt the body of legendary Olympian Lindsey Vonn after a series of devastating injuries that forced her into early retirement. Now she's headed to the 2026 Winter Games, ready to break records once again. This February in Milan, Lindsay's team and the entire USA medical team will be wearing FIGS. You can rock their official uniform too. The new Team USA collection from FIGS is engineered with FiberX, their most durable fabric yet. FiberX is setting the new gold standard for high-performance scrub wear. It's lightweight, breathable, and ultra-resilient, and of course, the styles come in red, white, and blue. Check out the limited Team USA collection and get a 15% off your first order at wearfigs.com. That's WEARFIGS.com with the code FIGSRX. That's wearfigs.com, code FIGSRX.
I would like to talk a little bit about kind of the next steps in your career because we talked about some of the implications it has, financially about someone extending their training. But one question that people might have is, well, what is this going to do if I'm trying to apply for fellowship? How is this going to affect my fellowship application? Will I still be able to be kind of on the on-cycle application? And what are some examples of what that looks like?
From the previous resident who did it in our program, matched into fellowship on a off cycle. She had done her 6 months where she ended her chief year in January. So that is I'd say it's a different example from mine where my 4th year, apart from starting in March of what other people would have as their 3rd year, my 4th year is really in continuity. I have a few months here and there. I think on the other side of that is that doing this program allowed me to do some awesome research that I was really excited about. And I got to do it over this 3-4 year period. So to me, it seems so much more rich because I got that time to really invest in it and understand the research.
One of the advantages of 5 and 6, instead of trying a shorter amount away, if you just commit upfront to taking 12 months off over time, theoretically, when you're going to finish, barring unexpected events, and I'm going to say several times a year, we get a contact with the program director saying we have a resident who had a bicycle accident. They're going to miss 6 weeks. We want to use the leave. Fine. And then a couple months later, they came back for 2 weeks, but now they're out again. So we're going to use the other 2 weeks. And also, can we extend their training into the end of July? Did we say July? We meant the end of August. And it limps forward. And you can imagine how disruptive that is to the program, how distressing and demoralizing it probably is to the trainee themselves, how much time consuming and distressing for the program director. And sometimes it's better to just step up front and say, wow, this unexpected, in my example, negative event happened. let's just take everything off the table and concentrate on getting well.
Yeah.
And if we're well a little bit early, then we'll contact the board and ask if we can shorten the 5 and 6, and that'll work out as well too. So I like it for that reason. It's sad to see the kind of limping forward, trying and failing efforts. And so you theoretically know when you're done or we're done. And I think 5 and 6 facilitates that, which might help with fellowship to link it back to the original topic.
And one thing I also want to bring up, because I think her story is just so awesome and showing what is possible during a surgical residency, is that the resident who did the 5 and 6 before me actually had 2 children during residency. And so she used the 2 6-month blocks in order to have time with her newborns. And then she matched into some fabulous vascular fellowship, and she's a absolutely phenomenal surgeon and person. And she really felt like it allowed her to have somewhat of the best of both worlds. She got that delicate time with her kids, and she progressed her career and is now done with fellowship. And listening to her talk about her 5 and 6 experience definitely inspired me, despite knowing that I might not have kids during it, but still being able to have time to do so many life events that we really gloss over in residency. And we say, oh, well, we'll take a weekend to get married. Well, it's a big thing. And if you can, if you can have the time to really fully be present, and I think what people will see when they get out of residency, and something research residents have always known, and I've found in my non-clinical months, is that there's a kind of space opening in your brain that happens when you have these months off, where you are thinking about what you want and what you need in a way that when you're in residency, you really, clinically, you can't, because you have to do these hours and focus all in on your patients. And having a step removed really allows you to think, what do I want out of life? Is this fellowship decision really right for me? All these different things that when you don't have the space to process them appropriately, it's much harder to make long-term decisions that are in your best interest. So I felt like her talking about how much it gave to her really was an impetus for me to take a chance and do it, despite having people say, well, you're going to miss a full year of being an attending and having the salary that it comes with that. And fellowships are going to look down on you for taking time off. And I had to say, I think this is in my best interest. And I think this will make me a great surgeon in the long run and have a long career. And I have to stick to my gut about how I feel when I think about having a month off. And all that I can get accomplished in that time, and be excited to go back to work on the flip side of actually having the time to look forward to. And, I tell Kara knows this, but at week 3 of my 4 weeks non-clinical, I get a little itchy. Like, I'm like, okay, like, when are we doing stuff again? Come on. I miss the OR and I get back to the OR. So yeah.
I think that's beautiful what you said, especially in regards to career longevity, because we spend, for a lot of us, our 20s, early 30s, and early 40s in training, and being able to see beyond that and see what your career can be and what you want it to be, I think is really important when you're putting all this time in taking care of other people, to be able to have the space to dedicate to your patients when you make it through training. Dr. Buyske, do you have any advice for residents who are considering the 5 and 6 from your position?
Well, I am a really big fan of the 5 and 6 for all the reasons that Bridget has brought forth, for allowing yourself space and time to be a parent, and as opposed to just drop a baby and come back to work, to explore things, to think, to refresh your enthusiasm for your career. I think the self-advocacy is so important. And it is funny how residents don't have that, because they advocate for their patients. They're really good at it. Other specialties might say we're too good at it. And it is the same skill. I actually thought that being a surgeon made me a better parent, because I was better able to advocate for my kids than I would have been had I not. But I had to learn it. The pathway was advocate for your patients, advocate for your kids, and then advocate for myself. That was like the sequence that I learned it in. So I think that it's valuable that way. I know this is sort of the boomer look back comment, but life is longer than it looks like from where you are. And you will not know, care, or remember that residency took a year longer when you're 50, 55, 60. I actually was not really pre-med, or not certainly not a committed pre-med in college. And I had to do an extra year of school to take all of the pre-med requirements. And the time it was like a catastrophe. My friends were like, you're going to take a year of school. How are you going to do that? How are you going to pay for that? Who's going to hire you after that? You're just like, are you not even going to get a degree? And it was like all this catastrophizing about it. And I literally, now that my friends have kids who are taking 5 or 6 or 7 years to go to college, and they all are heartbroken, and they're like, I'm just so upset. He can't get his feet under him. He's changing paths. And I'm like, oh yeah, it'll probably work out. And I get home before I'm like, oh my gosh, I did that too. I forgot to I need to call them and tell them it was probably going to work out okay. So the timing seems so awful. And I know there's the burden of debt and the desire for time, but in the great scheme of things, it really is so worth it to take advantage of the gift of time, which doesn't come that often. You're not likely to get it during your job. And if you do get it during your job, you're going to have to ask for it. You're going to have to advocate for yourself. You're going to have to say, I want this, or I need this, or we have to work it out in such a way that I can do this. So I think just don't short yourself. If you have a reason to need time off, make sure you get all the time off that you need.
Yeah. And I think I probably won't care in the long run that I had an extra year, but I certainly will care that I had a non-clinical month off when I got married, and I was able to plan the wedding without a lot of stress. And I was there for parents and family, and I got to remodel my brother's bathroom when he moved into a new house with my dad. And that was an absolute blast. So there are so many things that we can welcome in life and embrace in life that we probably wouldn't if we didn't have the time and space.
I'm just thinking back to when I had my daughter and the 5 weeks off that I had after I had her, and the 5 and 6 was offered to me as an option. And I knew that it was a really great option, and I'd seen people who were so successful with it, but it wasn't the right option for me. I was really grateful to have been offered that, because it meant that my program was looking out and saying, hey, it looks like this might be something that would be interesting to you, that would benefit you not only personally, but professionally. And I think that's a really, really important lens for a program director to be able to say, you know what? Your pathway might not look the same as somebody else's. And that's okay. And in fact, that's encouraged, because we want you to be successful at the end of the day. And I think knowing what's going to make you successful personally is really important.
That's a really good story. That was offered and you chose not to take it, but they recognized your autonomy, your personhood. You're not just a widget. Yeah, I like that. I really like that. It's just an option, and we should all have options.
One of these other questions that I have here is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you would want a resident or a program director or an institution to know specifically about the 5 and 6? Or any questions, especially Bridget, that you've been asked about the program that we haven't addressed already?
Something that Kara brought up in the past is sometimes when I go to conferences, people ask me about it, or I bring it up that I'm doing this 5 and 6 pathway. And unfortunately for them, most people don't know about it. Kara watched me kind of stumble my way through describing it before I came up with a script that I use. So I think if there's any people listening who are worried that they're going to be met with something less than excitement for the program, I'd say that everyone I've talked to and explained it, they're like, oh my goodness, if I had been able to do that when I was a resident, that would have been incredible. They're just enamored by the fact that it's a possibility now. And so I now say, I'm a part of the 5 and 6, which is approved by the American Board of Surgery to be able to take your 5 years of training stretched out over 6. And I use my non-clinical time for personal as well as research purposes. That has made it much better than watching me stumble like the lovely Dr. Button has.
It is an interesting, first of all, that is a very good elevator speech, for it. I like that a lot. I'm surprised when I go around and give grand rounds. Sometimes it's sort of updates from the board. Sometimes it's a little burnout or personality focus, in which case I talk about leave. And often it is at a training program. And I'm shocked at how often people had no idea how many options for leave there are. And then I'm not sure why they don't know. And then while you were talking, I just realized, when I started at the board, there were 150 training programs. There are now 350 training programs. So actually more than that. But so that's a lot of new program directors, even without turnover. And program directors can turn over pretty fast. And so a lot of them may just not know. There's a big book of rules. So back to the advocacy. If you need to take leave, maybe I encourage you to do research about what's available. And then from the flip side, I heard Doug Smink, who's been a big advocate for sort of quality of life during residency, give a talk once, and it was about how to receive the news that a resident wants to take leave. And he said it's 2 steps. The first meeting should be nothing but "that's fantastic. This is great news. Good for you. So happy for you. Yay. Let's talk again in a couple weeks." And then the second one is more like, what exactly are we talking about here? And and here are your options. And what he said, the first one should have no kind of action items out of it. It should just be receive it with nothing but joy, which I really found inspiring. And, I have staff that goes out on leave too. So I try to do exactly that.
Yeah, that's great advice.
That is wonderful. And I think this talks to as well the idea about policy and culture going hand in hand, that a change in policy can promote a change in culture, and a change in culture can promote a change in policy. And I think that's what you see with the 5 and 6, that it was always behind the scenes, but now it's out in the open, more people are learning about it, more people will take advantage of it.
We had a resident after me decide to do it for, again, very different reasons, has older kids, middle school age, and wanted time with them when on summer vacation, when they went back to school, on Christmas break, when they're off for a couple weeks for a break. There's many different ways to use it. And also, like, you don't have to have kids. You don't have to. I was, a single person who had family nearby, but really no other reasons that I would take it for a personal or a family reason. And I met my now husband on my 4th day off of my first non-clinical block. So life happens. And I'm really glad that I had, a month or 2 months to be able to get to know him, because if I had gone right back to residency and been in my super focused, all in mode, I don't know if I would have given that relationship the time and the, input that it needed.
So, and I think you asked about advice to program directors also. I think for programs to be able to take advantage of it, they need to have flexibility built into the schedule. So if every resident is doing exactly every rotation, then the work aspect comes into play very heavily, right? The rotations, the services count on this number of residents to match that number of attendings, to match that number of cases, to match that number of APPs or whatever. So any change in that has a terrible ripple effect and causes headaches for everybody. And that's been a sticking point for years for any kind of change or time off that we wanted to create. And if you just throw in a couple of undefined elective months every year, every couple of years, then they have the space, at least from the work aspect, from the service aspect, to make changes like that. So this sort of more forward-thinking, proactive programs realize that themselves. I didn't think of it myself. I figured that out from them. So it's not impossible if you have a little bit of flexibility already built into the schedule, and then you just have an opportunity to take advantage of it when somebody wants to take any degree of leave.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I will say our program is pretty small. We are 4 years, we're 4 per year. We've now expanded to 6, but my class is still 4. And we've actually found it, I mean, I hope I can speak for my program director, but it seems like to me that it has been actually less disruptive than having a resident leave for research and come back, because I'm still around for most of the time. I'm just kind of randomly not there. And so I'm in the call pool most of the time versus having a resident leave for research and then come back. It's actually been less disruptive.
Before we wrap up, I was just wondering if you have any closing remarks for our listeners.
Sometimes we lose sight of how incredible this job is. And I find that, some additional time has really allowed me to fall in love with surgery all over again, because I have the space and the time to do so. So if anyone's thinking about it, I highly recommend it. I'm always happy to chat with people about it.
And I think from my perspective, just to acknowledge that both of you are sort of in a vanguard of change. It makes it easier for people who follow behind you to do whatever their creative, slightly different thing is. Just looking at the first couple of years that we had 5 and 6, it was single digits, 1 person, 3 people, 5 people. In the last couple of years, it's been 15, 15, 13, and it'll get to be more. I'm quite confident about that. And you open the doors. If you know that if you can't see it, you can't be it. They can see you doing it so that they're willing to take a chance as well. And so are the program directors and the rest of the residency. So I just wanted to acknowledge that about both of you and thank you for that.
Dr. Buyske and Dr. Olson, thank you so much for joining us today.
Be sure to check out our website at www.behindtheknife.org. Download our free app available for Apple, iOS, and Android. Simply search for Behind the Knife in the App Store or Google Play to download the app. In the app, you can listen to our episodes, watch high-yield videos, and even access our premium content, including our oral board reviews and trauma video atlas. You can also follow us on Twitter at Behind the Knife and on Instagram at Behind the Knife Podcast. If you like what you hear, please be sure to leave us a review. Content produced by Behind the Knife is intended for health professionals and is for educational purposes only. We do not diagnose, treat, or offer patient-specific advice. Thank you for listening. We appreciate your support.
Until next time, dominate the day.